Alright, let's give this a bit of a crack at modelling. So, due to the number of scans, spherical triangulation is not the best way to do things. If it was just one scan like so, spherical triangulation is quite good to create little closed models of these sort of things. So I'll just show you the spherical sort of result. There are ways of merging it, which isn't too bad either, which we could look at if the loop surface doesn't do exactly what you want it to do. So I mean, that's the spherical in the top section is really good. So I'll then create a spherical of the next scan and add that in, and then the next one and the next one and so forth. The other way of doing things is to create loops, like ribs, through all of your data, or polygons as such, that fit your point cloud, and then turn them into triangulations. Now it's relatively easy except for the very top and bottom, and where you've got drive tubes coming out as such. So I'll just start about here. So first things first, select a bunch of the points in your scans. We're going to be using the loop wrap tool to first create our polygons. And I'm going to increase the number of points per loop to 1 every degree. And loop spacing is when I hit like an automated create loops downwards, or from one loop to the next selection, how far apart do we want them? And 0.25 is pretty good. Now filter obstacles, in this situation I'm going to turn off, because I want to make sure I've got every little curve. With that switched on, it's going to try and pick the outermost points, which is really important if you're doing a drive that's got, say, airbag, a couple of services, pipes, all of that sort of thing running down the side, cables, rock bolts, shit everywhere. Filter obstacles will try and pick the outermost rocks. So we want that off because your scope is quite clear. So single loop, if I zoom in you can see it's just created one polygon. And then I'm going to go all the way down to here and do a multi-loop. And you will see it create loops the entire way down. So that was pretty easy. Where you've got these drives, it's gone a bit spastic, and also where we've got this little sort of bit of muck and material on the other side of those drives, it's looking pretty nasty. So we can edit that though, it's no big deal. These lines here. So under CAD, all of those loops in that one chunk are created under this container. So I'm going to delete the points of my loops in this sort of section here. That looks a little bit more realistic. There's still a few which are a bit of a mess, like I can see that there is a bit of a problem, so I might just delete a couple of those points too. If you're not happy with an entire rib or line loop, we can actually delete the entire one, and the surface that will get created just jumps from one loop to the next, so it's not a great loss of detail in that area. In Studio 6 there's a much better tool coming where you select all of your points and hit create a point set surface from it, and it sort of follows and traces all of the detail you need. Alright, now the very top section, I'm going to create a spherical triangulation. A little bit of overlap there which I can clean up afterwards. I can probably even go a bit more because that top scan's pretty good. Create a spherical triangulation from my point selection. And now this origin point, it's tried to just pick the center of my selection, which is not right. So I'm using scan the initial one, 9905, so that's not going to work. That's it there, so point select mode. Click on that point to change my origin point. That will have created a spherical, which we can see there. and my loops. So I could do that same for the middle section where those drives are, but I'm not too fast. You can have a bit of a play. The loop wrap, it is a bit more of a primitive tool. It's been around for a long time. Some of the detail might not be exactly what you're after, but there are changes coming shortly. So I want maybe the bottom ones. So I might be able to do a lot of that. So load in 9815 position 2, 9815 position 2, spherical, click on that point there, making sure I'm using point snap mode. Fairly nice data in that scan. Save that one out. Load in the position 1. And this one I'm just going to do where that drive is, like so. Alright, so I've got some little chunks down and around the bottom, some sphericals. I also need this loop wrap modeled. So I'm just going to select my loop wraps. If you've got multiple sets of loop wraps, you can do them all at once as well. This icon up here is the loop wrap tool, which is also model loop triangulation. If you've got curves and bends in your data, you need to use iterative. Basically means it'll triangulate small sections in different parts and different triangulations rather than doing the whole lot at once. Because this is a fairly uniform stope, it's one direction, straight should be fine. So that's created this loop surface, which you can see there. So some of those lines look a little bit messy. If I wanted to sort of smooth that out a bit, when you're creating your loop wrap, I would go a larger interval. I mean, the best way to do it would be more points, but a lot of the reason they're created is because there's not very many scan points in that area. If I show you, it's a bit hard to see there, so let's create a section. I'll create a 3-point section. Might do it off the surface actually. And just create a section following that plane. Section width of maybe 2 meters. Alright, so that's my surface, and I can see that this area here is a bit weird. Let's have a look at my points. And there we go, big holes directly above my lower drives. And that's why it looks a little bit funky there. It's because we just do not have point data in that area. But overall, that loop wrap follows my detail quite well. Alright, so loop surface. How do we join our top and bottom sections? And we can also clean up these little drives a bit as well. So I'll do the top one first. What I'll do is delete part of that surface. And the reason I'm doing that actually, I'll show you, is because when you create that spherical, it's created these corners, which are pretty crappy. The other thing I could have done if I really want to fill in this area here, although I do not have point data, actually I might do that now anyway so you can see. Load in that scan, do that selection what you want as spherical. Point select what you want to do that spherical on, and turn off this trim long triangles. It means you force it to triangulate over areas where you do not have data. So you can see that there. So, and this is where it gets real important to delete that lower section. So there's my two surfaces. Delete that lower section on that one. And you want to basically cross over, like delete, so there's a tiny little gap in between. Point select, delete that little area there. So tiny little gap, Now to fill that in, select both surfaces, model loop triangulation, and just hit OK. It'll triangulate that little boundary as a separate file. So to join these three files together, have the three files selected, triangle selection mode, select all. I can either cut them so they disappear and get pasted into a new one, or in this situation I might copy just so I can edit if I need to. So copy, paste. Now under Scrapbook I have one file that looks like that. That's pretty cool. Alright, bottom section, we did that a little bit differently. Might take a bit more work. So this one here is the larger section. Again, I'm missing a bit of detail, which is why I've got that there. So let's just trim that down. Just crop there to delete everything else. I still just want to make sure that I've definitely got a nice little hole here for that to slot into as such. That's getting there. That should do it. So I've got my larger surface. I'll just wipe a fraction off the bottom there. Almost there, touch more. That seems pretty good. Now I need to do this sort of one section at a time because it's not going to really respect that boundary. A bit of a workaround would be to force this sort of to be whole. Actually, I'll show you that. So to force this boundary to be continuous, just delete that little chunk, I need to create a top surface so that these can patch together as such. I'll just trim that up as well because I can see that long triangle there. Alright, so edit, extend surface. I'm going to go from that point there to that point there, which I'm going to delete afterwards anyway. Alright, so I now have that surface completely surrounds each other. So when I do a loop triangulation, it should patch in no problem at all. So I can triangle select, select all. I might cut and paste this time. And then I'm just going to delete that fake section that I made up. Got to be a bit careful you don't delete too much information here as well. That's about right. And then the other model I did. So I have my two models. Loop triangulation, go for gold. Now I have three models, triangle select, select all, cut, and paste. And that is my finished model. Now, in this sort of video, you've seen how I can match sphericals to loops and cut in little portions to each other. What you may prefer to do is create sphericals of all of it in certain sections and then patch them all together. And that's totally fine. It will give you a little bit more detailed surface that follows the rocks rather than these lines, which, you know, I guess is fine. So, all depends on what you're after. These drives or tubes as such, if you want to delete them, I recommend going into perspective mode, which changes the view. And actually, if I just change my center of rotation to be there, rotate around so I'm inside of the drive, you can actually easily delete that information if you need them as hollow. Like so. So it's a bit of a mess, but like I said, Studio 6 does have some much better features coming for this dataset. But let me know if you'd rather see a blend of sphericals, and I can create another little video on how I would do that. So, but in the end, volumetrically, that model should be quite good. A little bit of trimming up. There's a few spikes, which we can see here. It's due to foreground shadows. A D spike, filling in these holes or just cutting them off flush would be okay as well, depending on how you're doing your volumes and if you're comparing them or subtracting your drive surfaces from them as well. One last thing I'll do is it's always a good idea to query the surface validity, making sure there's no triangles that jump between each other. So every now and then you do get surface intersections, and it can make volumetric sort of details hard to obtain. Alright, so that found 93 intersections, which is bad. So this will also highlight any holes we've got. So my holes are coloured yellow and my intersections are orange. Now there's two ways of fixing these intersections. So we can see that if I look closely, you might be able to just see that it looks like there's a triangle that cuts through another triangle. Bit hard to see there. But if you don't have many of these little clusters, an easy way to get rid of them is just point select the area, delete, and if it's not too big, just fill holes. It's always good to select only the hole you want to fill as well. So I've got another one here. You don't need to delete the whole thing, just a couple of the corners of the problematic area. Still a bit of a problem there. And then I can fill that hole in. So I'm always selecting a couple of points on the edge of that hole. Otherwise, you get bad things happen. Now, how does that look? Might still be bad, but we will see. So that's the manual method. So I did two up the top. I'll just have another look down here. So I've got a couple down the bottom where I patched in those two surfaces. There's an automatic method if you've got the labs menu activated. I think in 5.1 it's actually gone into the normal menu. Yes, it has. Fixed surface. If you're on 5.0, it's under labs, edit, fixed surface. 5.1 and newer, it's been shifted to the standard edit menu. So labs is basically tools that we're still sort of working on, not 100% finished, or tools that we're phasing out because they've been replaced by something better. So edit, fixed surface. I'm just going to pause the video for a while here because it might take 5 to 10 minutes. I doubt it will take that long, but we'll see. Watch the clock. 2:06. Alright, so that lab's tool finished in 2 minutes. Now I also need to run the same query surface validity and export my failures. I'll just delete those. export my failures to see the improvement. I'll just clear my window too, so we can see. I'm going to pause the action again, 2:08 PM. Alright, so it really took a minute, and it has passed and passed, which is brilliant. So there's still boundaries, so it can be a good idea if you want to see where your boundaries are present. There might be a couple of holes, so I can see I've got 2 down the bottom here. 9 edges, so 9 edges to the actual polygons. If you want a closed solid, the Labs Fix surface combined with filling in these little holes is brilliant. So always easiest to look from the inside of your stope. Make sure you're in that perspective mode, not orthographic. And I'll just wipe out a corner of that. And I can see that is a problem there. So it's always sort of handy swapping between line and point selection, so you can delete different portions of your surface. Fill in that hole. Got another one over here. There it is. Can't fill that in because there's a vertical facet there, so delete some of this. So this is where triangle select modes is quite handy because you can just very delicately delete parts of your surface. Cool, that should be enough. Select the little hole and fill holes. Alrighty, so that's all done. If everything's valid, we should be able to grab a surface volume. And there we go, got a volume, so all is working well. I take it you've probably seen the sort of differential solid volumes. I would add all of your drives into one surface, and then it would subtract that volume out of the other surface where it's contained within each other. So that's a pretty cool option. Then there's also model combination surface in the later versions where you can do closed solid and combine things. So differential solid should actually cut in these drives and leave a hollow model, and combination will add this model into your drive surfaces. So I might actually give that a crack, depending on if your surfaces are valid. Looks like it crashed out, but look, let me know if you've got any questions and I'll try and get some information to you when I can.